Welcome to the party, folks.
Hello.
Hey, tour guy.
Hey.
I am going to hustle you guys into some breakout rooms. Let's see. What should we use for our initial prompt for impromptu networking?
What's been the most liberating constraint you have encountered?
Boom, you heard the lady. What's been the most liberating constraint you have encountered? Let's go like so. Rooms should be set. If only I can find the place where they've gone. Oh, wise and powerful Zoom. Please hear my prayers. What is the most liberating constraint you have encountered? What is the most liberating constraint you have encountered? You'll have a few minutes to chat each other up. And let's see. Nope. What? There we go. And Unai, you should have gotten an invite into room 2. Awesome. Undaunted presence. How you doing, Wendy?
I'm really good, really tired. Thank you for asking. And I just delivered the only experiential workshop to 9 global COOs who were in a 3-day strategy meeting coming from all around the world. I always set up an assessment sheet at the back end to make everybody fill it out before they go. One of the questions I always ask, separate from content, is what's your comment, feedback on the style of the facilitator, which is me.
Okay.
And one person wrote, deliberately disruptive.
They get you.
Yeah, I was like, and I especially wanted to tell you that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that's deliberately disruptive. Oh, finally, somebody sees me for who I really am. Yeah.
How are you doing?
That's funny. I can so dig that too.
Yeah.
That's great. I love the observational quality of that, like without the evaluative statement. Like it's like, well, that's what it was. I may have felt different ways about that at different times during the process. That's what it was.
Yeah, in other years, it wouldn't have resonated so positively, but that was my intention.
Yeah.
Because they've just gone through a big change and they've been given a remit. So they got to the workshop and I said, good, now you're all expecting to do this. So they're all expecting to present. I said, first off, everyone who isn't presenting is going to turn their chairs and face the wall. So you're going to listen and really listen. And I said, and everybody's going, and I said, because your whole global company's just been through a big change, and I want you to experience here and now exactly what that feels like.
Right.
To come into a session with expectations and totally have them flipped.
All right. Woo. Putting the fire to them. I like it.
Yes.
What? All right.
We had a really good deep session last week. I still have notes.
Super.
One guy had said, I don't want to be recorded. So I sort of went, okay, well, over to you, group. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And the French guy who's really, really good, or maybe he's Belgian. He came in and he said, look, what you've just said is like coming into somebody's house and telling them how to live or arrange their furniture. We record these sessions. That is what we do in this group. And it's for you to either stay or leave. And I just thought, okay, right, absolute, yes, of course.
Yeah. Hold on, we got some new folks showing up. Well, let's get them into the game. We got Sam and Sherry and Janelle showing up to the party as well. Welcome, gang, to the Wise Crowds design call. We are already in the midst of an exercise that goes by the name of impromptu networking, which is just a series of different one-on-one conversations, where in this instance, you are invited to discuss what is the most liberating constraint you have ever experienced. What is the most liberating constraint you have experienced? So I'm going to push some invitations into some breakout rooms for you guys to explore this point of conversation so that you can be all nice and warmed up for when our Wise Crowds process sort of kicks off. And Wendy, I'll invite you to join up with Sherry. And I'll see you guys on the other side. Sam, are you having some trouble? I invited you into a breakout session with Janelle. Janelle, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Awesome. Cool. Sam, can you hear me? All right, Sam. I don't want to be a punk or nothing, but this is an active participant call, basically 1000%. So if you're not intending on participating in any way that I can track, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave the session. And if you'd like to view the session as a spectator only, it will be uploaded to YouTube. You can find that if you just throw into YouTube the Wise Crowds design call, it will show up for you. But I will need some sign of life. Otherwise, I'll have to, I won't have to, but I will choose to take care of the group by uninviting you. There's a playing. Was that you, Sam? So Janelle, what's the most liberating constraint you've experienced?
I actually didn't understand the question. I was in a breakout room with myself. So yeah, I don't know what those terms mean.
Ah, okay. Well, for liberation, we would expect that to have some indication of like enabling, freeing, making expansive. For constraint, usually we would imagine that is some form of limitation, some form of boundary. So might you have experienced a boundary that actually helped offer you more freedom?
Yes, I think that I can take perhaps a very personal example, which is the decision to stay in Denmark,
Okay.
which is like when one limits oneself geographically, then in terms of what opportunities are available and like how much investment is going to be needed, that becomes much clearer.
Ah, totally. So you made a choice to be in one particular place and not others, and that sort of opened up worlds for you, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
And dig that. Well, folks, so here's the rest of our participants for a Wise Crowds design call. Impromptu networking is 3 different back-to-back one-on-one conversations. So I'm gonna mix up the groups right quick and invite you to move over there, and invite you to move over yonder. And then Stephanie, if you want to hang out with me, I will reopen rooms. And once more, what's the most liberating constraint you may have experienced? And I noticed I just made a mistake because that'll be 10 minutes. So I'll rudely interrupt you at some point.
Do you want me to just stay here, Jeremy?
Yeah, hang out with me if you would. I don't think there's
Yeah.
anybody in that session, in that room.
No problem.
So anything come to mind?
Something that the first thing that came to mind for me was the work I do is project based. And so oftentimes a constraint that's either told to us or we find out ahead of time is that we can't add people to
Mhm.
solve the problem and we can't spend additional money.
Right.
So that's not a bad thing because it forces us to look closely at what we're already doing
Mhm.
from like a time, people perspective, budget perspective. So are we really maximizing what we already have? So I find that to be a helpful constraint.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's what jumps out to me hearing you say that is thinking about like color, right? Is that, sometimes when it's funny, the story of my couch is jumping out at me right now.
Okay.
Like we picked out this couch because we loved the color, and that made such like a hard commit in our whole living room that it was like, well, that's going to be the color, so deal with it. And then it was, what was really interesting is how that particular color started sort of salience tagging different options as we would go look for like furnishings, like different things and styles that we would never have actually like entertained, but because it was that color, it was like, oh well, that would really go with the couch. And then next thing you know, we trialed this weird we stayed up for like 2 years, like the worst lamp I can possibly imagine. It was horrible. It felt like one of those like interrogation spotlights right above our dinner table.
Yes.
But it was the right color, and so we went with it, right? Maybe that's a bad example for this purposes, but yeah, that way that having that boundary can sort of free up and create a different type of creativity.
I like that. Unai, who I was meeting with previously, he was talking about becoming a parent. So he's got a 5-month-old daughter. And so he was talking, I thought this was a good example too of like not staying at the office, whereas maybe before time would just go by and he'd maybe stay at the office longer. Right. But then even when he's home and he's caring for her, like she doesn't wait, right? You can't be like, oh, I'll get back to you in an hour. Like, no, she needs you now. And so just kind of changing his focus, if you will. And he talked about like his must-dos for the week. And, he might not actually get to those, but like she is a must-do that like he has to do, care for her. So I thought that was a good example too.
Yeah, there's an immediacy and a clarity in that, right? That it's just like no joking around.
Yeah, I like that example too. I like the couch one is good. That's a good one. We've all been there. Or the carpet you pick out or whatever. You're like, okay, now everything else.
Right. or the couch you get from your, like my first apartment, like the couch I got from my grandma, right? That was
Yes.
that was the move, and that became the thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. We used donated furniture for a long time. That wasn't the classiest. And it was kind of like, this is what we're gonna use. So
Right. Exactly. You just threw it together and make it work.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It works not for now. So good enough. Good enough.
Sure. Let's ping everybody. Let them know there's going to be 1 more minute.
And you're in Amsterdam, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I can't remember. I've been on 1 or 2 of these before. How long have you lived there? I can't remember.
I moved here in 2009.
Oh, okay.
I moved to the Netherlands. I've been in Amsterdam since 2015 now. But
Oh, okay.
yeah.
That's a long time.
Oh yeah, this is home. I'm pot committed, as we say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said 2005?
2009.
2009. Okay.
Yeah.
2009.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
been a good long while. And no, I'm never coming back. And the one reason above and beyond all is psychopaths. Like, it's just psychopaths everywhere. It's you can only imagine that the liberation and ease that brings to your life.
Yes. It's just a completely different lifestyle. We visited Amsterdam, Denmark, a couple other places pre-COVID, and it just is so different. I mean, seeing parents take their kids to school on a bike, and it just, that's the lifestyle, right? You don't need to have a car because you've got a bike.
Yep, precisely. And what's great about that is there's I don't know, it's just the safety. So I went to Brussels a few weeks ago, and Brussels, not very far removed geographically, culturally, kind of, but still a lot of cycling, these like rental bikes and scooters all over the place, but no psychopaths almost anywhere, which means, here I am just doing the craziest version of cycling, which is just in traffic. And I just realized, I was like, this is terrifying all the time.
Yes. Yes. We visited Washington, DC on vacation a couple months ago. And they've got they have some bike paths, right? At least where we were, but not fully. So sometimes you're on a bike path, sometimes you're in traffic. And I did not like being in traffic on a bike.
No, it's bad. It's a bad move. I don't recommend it to anybody.
Yeah.
All right. And my apologies for breakout shenanigans. And let's see. Hold on. Janelle, I will invite you to chat it up with Stephanie. There we go. And Unai, if you could hang out with me in the main space, let me actually change the breakout to 5 minutes. Otherwise, I'll have to do more work. And enabling constraints, liberating constraints, something like that. You know how that works. Unai, welcome, my friend.
Hi. Thanks.
A liberating constraint. Have you got one?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that we share the same we were sharing before, or that we come up, we're free, right?
I mean, it's however you want to go about it. I mean, it's your creativity, man.
Okay. Do you want to go?
Yeah. So I was just telling Stephanie about my couch, and sometimes how like picking a thing that has like a color can also have a particular design constraint. What's up? Hey, tall guy. Did we? Oh, he's okay. He's drifting around, enjoying himself.
So you said like the
Yeah.
color is. Oh.
Yeah, so I picked a couch. It's this like eggplant purple color, right? And so because we picked the couch, because we just loved the color of the couch, we didn't have any concept of like how that would look in this brand new house we just moved in. We were just like, this is a great color, let's go for it. And then we brought the couch into our house and we realized like, this is actually it's a very specific kind of color, right? And it sort of changed the whole sort of palette of what we were thinking about for our living space. So having that constraint, which was, okay, what are the colors that are going to go with this eggplant color, turned out to be a sort of enabling constraint for us.
Yeah, I mean, the more I talk, the more I realize that in a way, I in my life, I was always looking for not having constraints, but I feel that I need more and more. So that I don't diverge so much.
Right.
Yeah. So my constraint, the one I was sharing, you are done, or?
Sure.
Yeah, is that I became a father a few months ago. And
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So that was a big constraint, especially in terms of my time and what I could do. And regarding work, so I used to stay a lot of time in the office. I mean, no one was forcing me, but I used to do that with my partner. And now I have that limit because I reduced the number of hours that I work, and I spend half of the day at least with my baby, taking care of her.
Awesome.
And that helped me to prioritize and select what I want to spend my time on, what is not necessary. So it's still a process. It's not perfect, but it's it has been liberating in a way to say,
I can totally appreciate that especially that reduction in time sort of cuts the bullshit, right? What do I really need to get done, and what, figure it out.
Just focus on the musts.
I have the same feeling when the weather is like really, really beautiful, like when it's just like the type of day that makes you want to go outside and sing. It applies the same type of thinking. I think about how to use min specs on my to-do list, and I go through my tasks and I think about, all right, if I don't do this one, will I be fired? No? Okay. I'll do it tomorrow, right? If I don't do this one, will people get really, will things break and like the whole building catch on fire? All right, then that one I'll do. Everything else, just get out of here.
But it's fun, like, because when I heard you, like, with this question, I was thinking like, what? I don't have any answer, and now I'm thinking like, as I was saying, like, it's nice. I should have more maybe, and I was even criticizing that like on other people, what you were just mentioning, like my colleagues doing just what is the must. I was criticizing it somehow.
Right, now you see, man. Now you get it. I can dig that. Yeah, and I can also like as well like the sense of sort of direction change that sort of happens, that could happen or has happened, at least in my life, that you describe of, at one point I was looking for this wide open, this space of like, don't tell me what to do. Like, I just want to do my own thing. And then the older I get, I find myself really wanting, another constraint is collaboration. So I try and do most activities together. So, the constraint is, what can we agree on versus what do I want to do? Maybe there's a lot of things that I think are a great idea that you think are horrible, stupid, or dangerous that sort of fall off of the table. So that's another constraint that I find really helpful.
And how do you do that, like intellectually, let's say, like
intellectually?
Meaning like, okay, I would like to know about this. Do you still say no, that's too much?
I don't know, but our time boundary is across and we've got folks back. So, see, there's a constraint. It enables us, huh? Time boundaries. Well, thanks, guys. Welcome again to the Wise Crowds Liberating Structures design call. Today, we're going to field a help request or two from one another. Let me do this screen share. Who's it? And boom. That should get us into the place. So let me copy the link to this doc so that you guys can follow along and sign the Yonder guest book. What are we here to do today? We're here to use this structure called Wise Crowds that I'm going to explain here briefly. No worries, Janelle. Be safe. I hope you have cycle paths where you're at. Let's see. So here's a link to the Google Doc that I'm sharing on the screen right now, so you can work, do your own thing. I just want to quickly touch on the fact that every one of us is at a different stage in our liberating structures learning journey. So there might be some folks here on the call that are despairing cynics that feel like they have no familiarity or new to liberating structures. Even despairing cynics have great jobs to take up a membership role that can help us have a really productive time today and help us by maybe challenging some of the assumptions or orthodoxies, asking us the tricky questions of why. It's hard to do, but if you can do that, we'll have a wildly productive call. For cautious optimists in the house that are familiar with ±5 structures, help us to avoid being presumptive by asking for clarification and explanation. If we start getting caught up in consultancy speak or lots of jargon that you're not familiar with, then please do us a rock solid and say, what do you mean, so that we can unpack those things and make sure we're all on this boat together. For rapturous super users that are familiar with plus or minus half of the Liberating Structures toolkit, help us out by asking questions that you may have not answered before, that you're not quite sure if your answer is perfect or good enough or the right one. Just roll the dice. This is a super warm room. Get some practice in. Help us hear some fresh voices explain some things so that even graying old dogs like myself can learn a thing or three. And for the Maestro minimalists of us in the house, familiar with plus or minus all of the Liberating Structures toolkit, please, make space for other folks and then build on their input with your experience. Sam, welcome back. Can you say what's up? Oh, this is going to get interesting. So, regardless of where you're at in your Liberating Structures learning journey, there's an appropriate membership role that will help us have a great active space. The tool that we're going to make use of to do this give and get help thing is the Liberating Structures, that is Wise Clouds. Wise Clouds is very familiar to Troika Consulting, if you're familiar with that one. The basic innovation is that one of us will offer some form of help request, some form of a scenario that they'd like some consultation on, and then they will take the role of the client and in just a couple of minutes explain the basics of their design brief. And then the rest of us will take on the role of consultants and ask some clarifying questions, after which the client will mute themselves and turn off their webcam, and us consultants will have a conversation about the client's case and offer advice and all that good stuff. And then the client will come back in and offer their takeaways from having heard our exchange about their case. Is there any questions about the procedure itself and how we'll be going about that? In which case, awesome. And then I'm going to stop our screen share and invite whoever has a help request to take on the role of client and give us some work to do.
I'll raise my hand because I can only stay for a half hour more. That's okay.
Awesome.
Sorry.
What do you got? What have you got for us, Stephanie?
Okay, so what I have for you is I'm working, this is a new opportunity to volunteering opportunity in my community. And we are working to make our community food secure. So basically eliminating food insecurity in our community. We're just getting started. And so I'm looking for some advice from this group on how to do that. We will be working with, I'll call it approximately 30 other nonprofits who have some kind of hunger program that they are doing. Might not be the only thing they do, but some part of the work they do has to do with hunger relief. And so we want to bring those people together, bring our resources together to make an impact and eliminate food insecurity. That's what I have in brief.
All right. Now, clarifying questions.
Who are the hungry people? Like, are they part of the organizations? Or?
They would be clients of the organizations. We don't know who they are yet. We would need to do some research to understand if there's, certain groups, segments of the population in the community that tend to be more food insecure than others. We don't know that yet. We have some hypotheses.
Do you know where they're located? So is this demographic spread out over a large geography? Is it more concentrated in certain areas?
I don't know that either, but I live in a small community of about 25,000 people. So we have a high food insecurity rate within our county, if you will, which would be a small part of our state here in the US.
Stephanie, are you trying to find a role alongside the other organizations, or are you just simply trying to facilitate interaction between all these organizations?
Great question. Yes, I'm trying to facilitate the interaction between the organizations.
Okay.
Help's gonna be in form of actual physical, like food and supplies, or monetary help, or like is there a strategy, like hybrid, or doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter at this point.
Okay.
Are all the other organizations nonprofits, or are there businesses or academic institutions, or?
Sure. Most of them are nonprofits that have, like I said, some kind of hunger program. We also have some academic groups that we could tap into and businesses as well. This larger group has already met once and everyone has agreed, yes, we should work together to solve this problem. Now I'm trying to help with how.
Just the context of the positioning of your organization?
I am a volunteer, meaning this is not my full-time job or even a part-time job. I'm a volunteer.
Okay.
Taking my skills from the private sector into the public sector, if you will.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the most common way for you, for example, for people who are not hungry to get food? Like, do you go to the supermarket? Or you do
Good
what?
question. I love the question. Yes, we have multiple small grocery stores that people could walk to. We also have larger grocery stores that people could drive to. And then we also have people in very rural areas that would have to drive to get to a grocery store. There's also probably people growing their own food in gardens and things like that.
Could you clarify for me where you see your skills and your position in this group, even just at this stage?
So the group has only met once. I was not actually a part of that. I think they realized afterwards, okay, how do we do this? So I was invited to then come in and help provide a framework, meaning how could they work together moving forward? What would be most effective so that we actually make progress?
And what do they recognize you as? A strategist, a communicator, a facilitator?
A facilitator.
Okay.
Cool. And how did you get the invite to jump in on this? Is it the topic that you researched, or?
The business I work for is very interested in supporting this initiative.
Why?
Because we are in the food industry ourselves from a business standpoint.
Cool. So maybe just to reflect back on what I've heard so far. So it sounds like in this local context of around 25,000 people in this immediate community, there is a high degree of food insecurity. And some of the locals that are already addressing this issue tried to come together, have made a decision that yes, collaboration sounds like that would be a great idea. They're sort of looking for how do we go ahead and do this. And so your role will be to come in and help sort of facilitate coordination, or whether that's through monetary resources or non-monetary resources, a little bit up in the air. And we're trying to figure out how it sounds like what things for me is building a collaborative network. Any other clarifying questions? Otherwise, I'll ask Stephanie to mute herself and turn off her webcam.
I see Sherry has a question. I'd say and that's an important question. What we've already tried, Sherry, is everyone working on their own to do this, sometimes with overlapping programs, overlapping clients. So people have tried to tackle this, but always on their own. So think of it as we're going to have a school lunch program. We're going to provide food to kids who are at risk for them to take home for the weekend. There's been all sorts of initiatives that have taken place, but none of them have made a lasting impact. And they've always been organization by organization, not together. All right, I'll turn off my webcam. Thank you.
Cool. Collaborative networks. So first and foremost, in the context of, Stephanie, it sounds like this is an in-person thing, just to check. And how long do you think you want to take for this next initial session?
It can be in person or remote. My hypothesis would be that these folks would be more comfortable together in person. We can take as long as needed, but I'm imagining this would be multiple times we'd have to get together, meaning maybe we come up with a plan, we try something, we come back, sort of an iterative cycle, if you will. It doesn't have to be like a one and done kind of thing.
For sure. So just how much time for this next session do you think you'd like to, you think you can convince people to take?
Let's assume a couple hours, like 1 to 4 hours.
I'll split the difference at 2, and we'll just roll with that. Cool, thanks. Sherry, you got the game for us. What structures ping for you, and how might we string them together, gang?
This is more of a question to everybody. Something echo cycle, engaging groups in growing and sifting their portfolio of activities, combined with generative relationships about noticing patterns and unleashing local action. Those are the two things that kind of popped up, and I don't know if they're appropriate or useful or good.
Killer. Anybody else? Sherry, did you mean to have your hand raised? What might it look like if it were together? Cool. So it's like a prompt or invitation for folks in the space. I like it. Anybody else in terms of what structures or questions, what jumps out at you hearing hearing Stephanie's such scenario that we might want to recommend.
I'm still a newbie at the liberating structures, but 1, 2, 4 all together, the wisdom could be a process.
Totes. One, two, four, all the things.
Yeah, let me just get my book.
It seems as if there's a mix of identifying what's already been done, by whom, what would we intend or like to do, and then that by whom. So for me, the liberating structures are in the middle of that. Those are the two big points for me.
Righteous. Unai, does anything jump out at you?
Well, I was thinking about the people and the invitation, like who to invite, who to involve, and yeah, I don't know but I don't know if this is out of the, or if there is a liberating structure to do so. I mean, but not involving not only NGOs but businesses and the beneficiaries and everyone.
Which is funny as you sort of bring in who to invite, who to involve. Social network webbing is a pattern that I think sort of jumps out at me. So social network webbing would invite participants to literally make a map of the social network sort of between them, and to actively sort of pursue this question of sort of who else would be well served to be in the room, and more in particular, who is in the sort of social network and the fabric of the community that should be talking together, but maybe isn't, right? So which relationships might we want to weave in? That could be a really interesting exercise. I'm also sort of holding, there's a really interesting book that I would highly recommend to everybody that is called Strategic Doing by Ed Morrison. Ed is a pretty cool dude. I've only talked to him a couple times, but he gives me like, makes me want to nod my head real hard. And his whole method is sort of built around developing these collaborative networks. And the most salient points that might be really interesting for this exploration would be, what are the sort of assets and resources that we have that are available to us that might be we might be happy to share? So that could be, when we say assets or resources, that could for sure be capital, but it could also be physical resources, machinery, spaces. It could also be relationships. It could also be influence within the community, any asset that you can sort of think that you would be happy to sort of throw in the pot that wouldn't give you too much anxiety to toss in and is sort of readily available. Anything that you would want to be sort of cautious with, you would sort of intentionally withhold, as would be the expectation. So what are the assets that are sort of in the room? And then to invite people into thinking about, how might we recombine those things in ways that we haven't tried before? So, and in the book, their general recommendation is to sort of lean heavily towards a simple, a collaborative task that you could basically accomplish within 3 months with only a 1 hour of participant engagement per month. So just a couple hours, sort of continuously driving people. The structures that sort of jump out to me as relevant for that exploration 1, 2, 4 all is definitely way up there. If I'm trying to surface resources, I don't know if anything gets better than that, actually. The question about, yeah,
if organizations in an initial stage where they do know a lot about what they're capable of doing, what I need from you might be a process. In other words, once they start to understand what each has, they can then start to articulate their requests better through what I need from you.
Some form of marketplace for asks and offers could be interesting.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Janelle. I'm Viking, so apologies for the sound quality, but I don't know any of the liberating structures, which is why I'm on this call, but I think content-wise, so I think in terms of content, like Stephanie mentioned that each organization is taking like a disintegrated approach and they want to integrate the efforts to optimize them. So I don't know what structure would support this, but every organization needs to understand what is their value at stake. Like, why is it that a specific like what's in it for them, essentially, because that's where the competing stakeholder interests will like undermine collaboration when one interest trumps another. So just being explicit about like what's in it for my organization to participate in this collaboration.
And the STAR process in terms of trying to sort of work on generative relationships.
Generative relationships. So generative relationships is kind of like a micro team health check, so to speak.
Okay, within an organization or within a group, yeah.
Yeah, so it asks us to, on a scale of 1 to 5, just make some appraisal about our sort of separateness or diversity. You know, hey, what,
okay,
you know, how much sort of difference do we have in the group?
Yeah.
Our ability to tune in, so S being separateness, T being tuning, so how well do we listen to one another? Action, how well do we actually act as a group? And R being reason, so you know, how clear is our purpose? Interestingly, in this context, I think purpose is feels less urgent to me. I think coming back to Sherry's invitation about, you know, what might it look like if we were together, I think is a really interesting direction to go. What, you know, yeah. So what would it look like if we were to tackle this question of food insecurity from a combined forces way, and especially to lean into what might it feel like what might be my like visceral sensation in that space, and then to think again about, you know, our stakeholders who might be impacted if we could be successful at sort of tackling this challenge together, and thinking as well about the clarification in terms of outcomes to say, how might we know, you know, what might we see, hear, and notice that lets us know that we are actually accomplishing our goal of reducing food insecurity. So that sort of like initial set of 4 invitations, I think, could be really interesting, just in the frame of like 1, 2, 4 all. Just especially if this is a relatively new group, I think there's an interesting space of just repetitiously 1, 2, 4 all, 1, 2, 4 all, in a few different ways, just so they really sort of land the rhythm of it. What's up?
Just one element that was already mentioned, but still is resonant for me, in including the recipients of this food program. I suggest that it's as empowering as the food itself. that they be included in what might this look like if it were a success, in that they get to choose what the outcomes might look like for them, because they are the ones at the coalface. And I think that would be brave and scary and disruptive and very unusual to ask the intended recipients, what does a successful food program look like for you?
Mm.
Let's see. And Sherry, wham. I think when I say wham, what I mean is just like to emphasize that pattern with different invitations at the center of it, sort of keeps things relatively straightforward. It's not very complex or sort of flashy. But it's extraordinarily effective and sort of builds a particular muscle for, oh, like we're able to cover a lot of ground in pretty interesting ways, just using this pattern.
Mm. If
Cool
there
guy.
were if there were sort of range of organizations at this event where there were some already involved in the game, and there were others who are interested in being involved in the game, then a fishbowl experience could be a way for the ones that are currently involved in the game to digest that and share it. But then the others outside with the fishbowl experience, you benefit from that. So it depends on the sort of total universe who's there.
Cool guy, I see you got your hand up.
Hey, I actually needed more clarification around the scope of delivery to recipients again. Like, okay, does it include any considering governmental maybe participants or more officials? Could it give land to produce as well to people, or like for some time, or in general, like somehow? Or also, does it of course when it is asked, or it could be asked to people, would you like to participate in that, would be great, like, because they could secure by producing, I mean, not as like solution, but does it include that, like, if people could say, hey, count me in such? Yeah, I was wondering if they're able to offer that. Yeah, kind of.
Hard to tell. So I think we've got some interesting foodstuffs. Ha 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 ha. Get it? For Stephanie, is there any other additional patterns that sort of jump out, or are we good to bring her back in? We're Sherry throws in, how about community food sustainability gardens? We already want to jump into the solution space with them,
Yeah.
So
That's so human to want to do that, isn't it?
No, it is the way, right? Like, especially when there's a challenge that sort of has this sense of like urgency. I don't know about you guys, but just hearing it just makes me go like, caretaker role activated, right? So I mean, what's up, Stephanie? What has been valuable for you?
I just want to say thank you. I really appreciated that, including how the different structures might link together. I didn't really hear anything that was invaluable. It'll probably be a matter of picking and choosing. A couple things stood out, especially at the end there. on like landowner or government. So maybe looking ahead to possible solutions just to make sure those people are included up front instead of at the end when it's like, hey, we have a solution and they haven't been with us during the process. I thought that was a really good point. I also really appreciated the suggestion to include not a structure, but to include recipients. So clients, it'll be more difficult to include them, but I think, you know, people that participate in building the world and how they want it to be is important. So we may have to get creative on being able to get those folks to the table, so to speak, but I think it's worth the effort to make sure that recipients are included if possible. I know there's a lot of shame associated with being hungry, right? And not having food, especially if you can't feed your kids. So that's just something I'll have to be sensitive to as we try to include some of those clients if they're willing, or perhaps they were in a situation and now their situation's better. You know, that might be an option. So those are just a couple things that stood out to me, and want to say thank you for the ideas and the book recommendation as well.
Yeah, from that strategic doing book, one of the in terms of like an initial project, and they talk about looking for the big easy, right? So that relatively easy action that may not be the most massive impact in the world, but enables you to sort of start to build the muscles of like, oh, this is how we recombine resources to actually get things done. Just in order to show, hey, within not a whole lot of time and engagement, we've actually been able to accomplish something that then gives us a story to help bring in more engagement perhaps, or to build that container of trust so that we can do more high impact or make use of those resources that in the absence of that trust, I just wouldn't bring to the table. So.
Right. Well, I said I could only stay for an hour, so I'll have to give back to you all at a future session, but just want to say thank you as I hop off here. So appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day or evening. See you next time.
Thanks, Stephanie. See you around. Well, which brings us to our next question. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have one. So next week, a colleague and I, we work at a local NGO, and we are going to facilitate a training for other organizations. So there are going to be in total around 30 people from around 10 different NGOs from Tanzania. And all of them are going to be totally new to liberating structures. And all those organizations work in different sectors. I don't know in which sectors they work, actually. And we have been hired with the purpose of those organizations reflecting on how they implement a participatory approach, so that they exchange experiences and they develop ideas on how to further expand their participatory approach with the communities they work with. We have already suggested basic training content. So it includes some, let's say, more structured processes, or more theoretical, let's say, explanations about what participatory approach is, about results-based management, etc., etc. And so my idea was to include liberating structures within the different phases. So the first phase is the needs assessment, the second phase is the planning, then implementation, then monitoring and evaluation, and finally feedback. So I was thinking of including different liberating structures within those phases. Yeah, it will last for 2 days, and we have the freedom to suggest like the schedule and everything, and everyone will be there all the time. Yep.
right. So it sounds like you're in between a bunch of you said 30 people from 10 different NGOs in different sectors. So the context that they sort of find themselves in that has brought you in to help them out. Can you help give me a little bit of background on that?
Yep. So there is this Dutch organization who is working with a number of local NGOs here, and they worked with the NGO I worked for in the past, and they liked our participatory approach.
Okay.
So they are the ones organizing this workshop for all the local organizations they work with, and they just prepared a TOR, but they really wanted us to share a bit about our experience, because apparently they are happy with what we did in the past.
All right. I'm seeing how the parts fit together. Clarifying questions, gang? So let's get the logistics out of the way. Is this going to be a remote session or in person?
In person. We will be together in a hotel for 2 days. Well, 2 days and 1 morning.
And is that 2.5 days? That's your time for the whole program, or what for the scope of our design brief? How much of that time might you want to look at?
Just those 2 days. I mean, I don't know what will come later. No idea. But the plan so far is only those 2 days.
And earlier you mentioned using or sort of offering liberating structures for each phase of the process. Can you give me a little bit more surface area about that? Is this like a training exercise? Are you trying to give them tooling, or?
Yeah, so like we were requested that the participants, as I was saying, learn more about participatory approach, what different organizations do, and then I thought that sharing some liberating structures would be great for them, because I guess no one knows about liberating structures. I'm just assuming, and because I believe they are very participatory in nature. And I don't know if I clarified it.
I think I get it. So in terms of, the sort of bigger goal being to help these NGOs sort of upgrade their capacity of participatory process. And by that, I guess I want to sort of scope down to NGOs here to help. Are you actually in dialogue with the people you're trying to help?
Exactly.
Okay. And so in order to help sort of upgrade that, you think that one of the sort of it sounds like we've got a solid working hypothesis is that by just giving these NGOs some liberating structures that they can use in their general approach to rolling out work, we might be able to offer them some very high utility tools that they can use for this purpose of engagement.
100%.
All right. Well, I think I get it. Any other clarifying questions?
No, I think I understand.
All right, Unai, then I'll invite you to turn off your webcam and microphone, or no, turn off your webcam, mute yourself, but listen, importantly. Well,
so what comes up for me is so there's a big meta topic around how does everybody understand what participatory approach is. So it's just 3 words. So for me, then the kind of 1 to 4 all work to surface how everybody thinks about it. And and then you're using a participatory structure and illustrating them at the same time. So that's one idea.
Excellent. What do we mean when we say that word?
Yeah.
And I think, given that, I think what's interesting is debriefing actually jumps out at me. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine in the context of these 2 days, like offering a lot of tools in an explicit manner, but also the sort of workshop format itself, you're probably going to give them the experience of using a lot of these tools. So just to ensure that I have bookmarked sufficient time at the end of having used something like what, so what, now what, or EcoCycle, to not only try the tool out, but also to make it very explicit that this is a tool that you guys can use for your thing, and tell me about it. So when I think about debriefing, I think about 3 questions. What did this tool make possible? What sort of anti-patterns did it help us prevent? And where might I use it in my life? So just to sort of stick the landing, ensure that I've got like an extra 10 minutes, after every move, just so that we can go, hey, metacognitive view, this was the tool. How are you going to use it? Could be very helpful. In terms of the content portion, there's a fistful of things that jump out. I made mention of what, so what, now what. EcoCycle planning, I find, is endlessly useful. Especially, I mean, it really at all phases of these games. Like if I think about the larger flow of a big project that may be in intervention, EcoCycle planning is a great way to think about all of the things that I'll have to do over the whole course of that thing. So I could see very easily like needs assessment mapping to gestation, or the regeneration phase, planning sort of mapping to the birth quadrant or phase, monitoring and evaluation, sort of that flow up into maturity, and then feedback somewhere after maturity in the way of creative destruction, actually. And just thinking about the portfolio of all the activities that we'll need to go about in the frame of the EcoCycle already does something, and then how to use that tool to, at any phase in the game, to think about, as a reflective tool, how are we doing towards this goal. So EcoCycle would be one.
Are any of the structures sort of where you unpack a case study around something?
Unpack a case study.
In other words, if you had something sort of in the NGO sector where significant things shifted, in other words, are these case studies available, and then some process to I mean, you could use 124 once again as a way to take that piece of work, and the more local it can be. So, for example, if there was a case study in the local jurisdiction where they are, and then use, for example, the 124 process to unpack the essence of what they see.
So yeah, so I can see an interesting bit of how might I do that? Well, if you can find some form of storytelling, a celebrity interview or a user experience fishbowl could be a good way to sort of bring that information in a more organic way into the space. And then sort of pairing that up with something along the lines of what, so what, now what, just to really empower people to trade notes on what was salience tagged for each other. So that could be an interesting way to bring that information in there. What's up, Wendy?
I'm feeling like the spanner or the monkey wrench in the works. What's coming up for me, and it could just be personal, is that the context of NGOs, I'm imagining mixed languages, mixed cultures, mixed challenges, depending on what the NGO is dealing with. And my concern is, if we go too far down a strategic rabbit hole, we lose the simplicity of saying, here's a shovel, we're going to help you dig for water. I'm being metaphorical. Here's a wind sock, that's going to help you tell the best time to plant crops or whatever. My concern is with the multiplicity of cultures and mindsets in this training session, to keep it simple. That's just what I kind of want to share. I'm getting anxious about all the intellectual strategizing that I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just me because I'm tired, but I'm feeling anxious about the recipients actually getting at least one great thing that they can really get in this session and then take back to their teams and make sure they really get that one thing. Yeah, I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, I think that's great signal. So one of the things that, it's funny that we're even talking about this because it seems like so incredibly obvious from like every school that you think about, right? Whether it's an agile perspective, whether it's a sort of design thinking perspective, human-centered, whatever, it's always like include the people you're trying to solve a problem to. So solve a problem for in the problem solving process. And yet, like, it continues to be the hardest thing in the universe for so many of us. So there's I think a really could be a worthwhile exploration of like sort of understanding the restraining forces in that landscape of why aren't we doing this thing already? Why are we here in this 2.5 day thing to do this thing that like we all know, everybody in this room knows we should be doing, but yet we don't. Like, what's up with that? And so there's a bigger methodology that could be really interesting that I have treated with liberating structures, which is called the immunity to change.
Yeah.
By Keegan and Leahy.
Very powerful.
It really goes directly at that, like, hey, why are we doing the things that actively undermine our intended goals? And I can put an image in the document as well that might give some surface area to that. It's really hard to explain like in like 1, 2, 3, but we can give it a try. Once it's on the doc, we can do a share screen thing. All right. So this is probably one of the more detailed ways to look at this thing, but if you want to do it, the reason I like it is this is everything you want to do. So step 1 is usually start with your explicit goals. So what are the things that you really want to share? You got your hand up? Increase font size more. I don't know if I can. There we go. Can do it. Is that good? Work through one time. Sweet. This is an image that I stole from someone, kind of. Step 1 looks at your explicit commitments or goals. This is, what do we want to get better at? This could be, sort of your 1, 2, 4 all around participatory process where we define, the thing that is we're trying to get great at. Step 2 becomes this exploration of, okay, what is it that we're doing or not doing that actually moves us in the opposite direction. So what I've done before is I've done 9 whys on step 1 to help us sort of map out, what it is our impact, our purpose that we're trying to accomplish, and then using something along the lines of TRIZ to help map out the field for what is it that we're doing that moves us in the opposite direction. What the immunity to change what really sets it apart is that it asks us to look for the logic, so to speak, of that step 2. So why is it that we are actually doing this stuff? What sort of competing commitments exist that keep us doing that stuff, which on one hand is really extraordinarily straightforward. So what I did once is I did a sort of remixed version of 9 whys. So we took the laundry list of stuff that we knew we wanted to stop doing from TRIZ, and then we took all of that stuff and we said, okay, now if I imagine stopping doing all of that, what is I'm worried will happen? What are the anxieties, the concerns, the nagging bits that I would be afraid of? And then we just dug in. So what is it that makes me worried about that? What is it makes me worried about that? So just sort of did an opposite 9 whys on that stuff, which helped us sort of create more surface area for that big assumption and get closer to it. What is it about the way we see the world that leads us to have coped in this way? And this is also a really interesting space to do tiny monsters. Tiny monsters is one of the liberating structures in development. There's actually, I'm sure there's actually a YouTube video on, not from this channel, but if you go to the playlist on the channel where I save these, the Jeremy and the Gospel of Change, there's a video of me doing this workshop. And so after that initial process of going through all this good stuff and basically confronting ourselves with these tiny monsters, that does a couple of interesting moves. It helps us externalize the sort of voice of fear, so we can remix our sort of relationship to it, which is getting into a big like theory of change thing. I'm sorry, guys. We've scope creeped so far beyond liberating structures, but
it's fun.
Yeah. So an interesting question at this stage becomes is sort of around a wicked question, really. So how is it that I want to accomplish this goal, and how do I attend to this anxiety or this concern that I have that maybe it is in conflict with that explicit goal? So we both of those two things are sort of required, which leads sort of seamlessly into a sort of 15% solution. What's that? Drugs?
Drugs.
I didn't say it, you did, but yes. It's,
pharmaceuticals.
To be a person of substance.
Do not put that in the chat, please.
Yeah. We'll cut it out of the video. So that could be one really like extraordinarily particular string or some feedstock into different liberating structures that you might want to take a look at. And I'll be happy I'll put links into the doc as well, so that can give some more materials. But I've been rambling so long. Anybody else? Time. Yeah. So come on in, Unai, and tell us what you may have taken away from this meandering conversation.
Yeah, a lot of ideas, but this of keeping it simple. Yeah, I don't know. I sometimes feel that I also try to make things too complex, and then people do not follow, do not understand, do not want to follow. They get bored. So keeping it simple, I think it's something important. Yeah, the thing about the unpacking the case study is also along the lines of what we were planning. So it sounds good. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well, all right, gang. Well, that's been it for our Monday, 20th of June edition of the Wise Crowds Design Call. Thanks everybody for hanging out and offering
lovely.
some help to our friends. Always good to hear from you. Any words of parting before we close out?
Yeah, it's been fun meeting some new people and joining this group. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out, Grant.
Yeah, super nice meeting you all. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I always enjoy the intellectual and humane acumen that gathers in this space. Both those things together, I love it.
I love
Thank
being
you.
here. I guess it's been always like self-check of hey, what's like your desire in it, your and maybe making of hey, think for others, you know, like I like this one, and it's like what I always try to bring up in people, like hey, like tell me how you imagine future, or where you need help and stuff, because at some point I would say these are also liberating constraints that having this itself, I mean, it's like, I don't know, something that maybe like in Conway's Conway's law, like maybe these groups are reflecting who they are with the tools they are doing, and also I don't know, I really gotta read the book. It's my second time here, and I gotta check like more truly now. I feel totally more like it. I'm wondering if could be also in the role of client, if that's like possible. I was
Totally.
gonna ask that, so I can maybe prepare. Yeah, that's me. And yeah,
Awesome.
great
Thanks,
to be
Toll Guy.
here.
Thank you, Jeremy, for hosting us.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. Thanks for hanging out.
I love the way you reflect in the chat what's been said. I haven't seen that done before. That's a very, very powerful process.
Yes,
Is there somebody in the background sort of trying to at least capture a fast typer, trying to catch what bumbles out of our mouths as we talk? It's very, very powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. Well, gang, thanks so much for hanging out. I hope to see you next week.
Cool. Look forward to it. Bye all.
Bye
Safe
all.
travels.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.